All right, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are joining us from. My name is Maxwell Okello. I'm the CEO of the American Chamber of Commerce here in Kenya. It's a delight to have you join us today for what is a very important discussion. It's a forum that we've been looking forward to in partnership with Enable, and I'm sure that we will all be edified. And so firstly, I want to just apologize for starting a few minutes late, but we'll make sure that we catch up as quickly as possible. So I want to, at this point, just cede the screen to my colleague, Derek Vikiru, who will be leading us today. Derek is our membership and partnerships lead. But I also, before I do that, I just want to acknowledge our partners, Enable, led by Irene, whom you'll be hearing from shortly. We also have two other panelists who are joining us. We have Laura and Richard, and each of them will be introduced properly shortly. So with that, I want to hand over to Derek to take it on from here. Derek, over to you.
Thank you, Maxwell. And I want to join Maxwell in welcoming all members, and to also appreciate Irene and Enable for agreeing to do this with AmCham. We think that it's a timely discussion that we need to have. Before I give my welcome remarks, I would like to just take us through a few housekeeping rules. The chat box is open. If we have any questions, let's feel free to put these in the chat. We will run this as a discussion, like an open discussion is a bit later. If we have time also, we will allow for individuals to ask their questions live. So should we get to that point, please feel free to raise your hand, and the technical team will allow you an opportunity to ask your question. I'd also like to greet all of you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending from where you're coming from. As I said earlier, it's a privilege to welcome you to the AmCham Disability Mainstreaming Forum that we are doing in partnership with Enable. This forum is a testament to our shared commitment to foster an inclusive landscape where accessibility and equal opportunities are at the heart of innovation and progress in our companies. So here at AmCham, we firmly believe that businesses thrive when we embrace diversity and inclusivity. And in today's discussion, it's not just about compliance or looking at this topic as a corporate responsibility. It's about ensuring that businesses remain competitive, we remain innovative, we remain relevant in a rapidly evolving world. Especially in the digital space, we know that digital accessibility today is not an option. It is necessary to unlock the full potential for all individuals, including persons with disabilities. So with over 1 billion people worldwide living with disabilities, we cannot afford to overlook this significant segment of the global market, workforce, and community. We need to integrate them, and by integrating accessibility into our business strategies, we open doors to new opportunities, we strengthen our brand reputation, and in the long run, we drive long-term growth for our companies. So today's forum will provide valuable insights from our list of panelists into some of the digital accessibility standards that I just mentioned, the challenges people with disabilities face, especially in digital environments, and how businesses can be truly inclusive. We'll hear from experts, leaders, and accessibility champions in shaping the future that empowers everyone. I encourage each of you to actively engage and ask questions. Please use our chat function and take away actionable steps that will help your organization to embed accessibility into your core strategies. Together, we can transform accessibility from an afterthought to fundamental pillar of business success. Thank you for being part of this critical discussion. I look forward to an insightful discussion, and I hope all of us are as well. At this juncture, I would like to welcome Irene, who's the founder and director at Enable. Irene will be our moderator today, and Irene will introduce herself and also introduce her panel and take the discussions forward. Welcome, Irene.
Thank you so much, Derek and Maxwell and the entire AmCham team. We have a whole technical team that's supporting this process, for your time and effort in making sure that we succeed in engaging businesses to understand why disability and technology and digital accessibility is very, very important, the discussion. I'll start off by saying that Enable is a nonprofit organization based in Washington, D.C. and Nairobi, Kenya. And we focus on empowering youth with disabilities in Africa through technology. So we really focus on digital accessibility. It's at the core of everything we do, meaning that all the technology that's being used by persons with disabilities, whether it's a website, it's a mobile app, any software application that you have, we ensure that it's actually it's designed and developed with people with disabilities in mind. Because if you gather the requirements of those with disabilities and meet them during your product development life cycle, then this product will benefit many more people. And we'll have that conversation as ongoing. So as for Enable, we focus mainly, our core program is training blind children on digital skills. And now we've even moved to working with making sure that deaf students have access to additional AI powered captions, like captions, which is very important for communication. But most importantly, we bring together stakeholders from across the continent, across Africa, including the international community, talk about disability, and most importantly, digital accessibility. And why do we do this? Because Africa has more than 200 million people with disabilities. Yet, all this technology boom we're hearing about, the mobile apps, the transformation, whether it's in healthcare, in business, in finance, in anything, it's not inclusive. Today, people with disabilities, when they go to the banking sector, even sometimes just getting an ATM card or online banking is a problem. Accessing mobile money applications is a problem. So we have to think as businesses, the digital products that we offer to Africans, are they accessible? And if they are not, we want you to know that yes, there are global standards for accessibility that you can follow as you develop your digital products and services. So this is not something new worldwide. Actually, the West has done a fantastic job of implementing accessibility in the last 20 or so years. But in Africa, it's definitely something new. So we definitely want to see what we can do together during this conversation. And I want you to know that it's not the last conversation, it's just the beginning of many. So to save time and to get us started, I'm privileged to be hosting an amazing team of panelists who are going to be sharing with you more information about digital accessibility and disability in general. So first, I will have Tabi Kioko, and what I'll do is I'll just mention their names, and then I'll give each one a chance to at least introduce themselves. So maybe Tabi Kioko is the Diversity and Equity Leader at Safaricom. Tabi, can you go ahead and introduce yourself, please? And Tabi hears? Tabi, you're on mute. Okay, as Tabi is unmuting herself, let's proceed to Laura. Laura Allen is the Director of Accessibility and Disability Inclusion at Google. Laura, please proceed and introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. It's so nice to be here with you all. I hope you're all doing well. Yes, my name is Laura Allen, and I have been at Google for the past 15 years, working within the accessibility space. I will get into many more details during the conversation about what that means. But I also am very honored to serve on the board of Enable and work very closely with Irene. I will also just mention that I have a disability myself. I have a very rare visual condition that impacts my central vision. So if you can imagine, for me, peripherally, things are still largely clear, but anything that I look directly at is highly impacted and swirls of flashing lights. So that has led me to really dive into the world of assistive technology since I was 14 years old, and navigate many different hurdles through the education system in the United States, which sort of propelled me to not only use a variety of different assistive tools like text-to-speech and magnification and contrast, but also really want to have a career in making this better, improving accessibility across the industry. So thrilled to be here and part of this conversation today, and I'm excited to get into it with you all. So back to you, Irene.
Thank you so much, Laura. Richard Matibu, Country Director, Light for the World. Please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thank you. Thank you, Irene, and thank you to everyone who has worked behind the scenes to make this event possible. My name is Richard Mativu, working as a Country Director for Light for the World Kenya Country Office. Light for the World Kenya is part of Light for the World International, and we primarily focus on 4 areas, that is economic empowerment, health, inclusive education, and humanitarian action. So you realize that we are very strong on economic empowerment, that is skilling young people and connecting them to jobs. Something about me, I have been in the disability and development industry for the last 17 years. I have worked in various organizations, and just like Laura, I'm also a person with disability. I'm deaf. I normally work with a sign language interpreter in the office. So I'm really looking forward to the discussions and deliberations in this meeting. Thank you, everyone. I'm looking forward to that full engagement.
Thank you so much, Derek. Richard, I'm sorry. Julius, can you step in and introduce yourself? Mm-hmm. You're on mute, Julius. Good. Sorry, we can't hear you, Julius. Let's give Julius a moment. And if Tabi is here, Tabi, are you here? Tabi Kioko?
Hello?
I think we lost Tabi.
Yes,
you can hear me now?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, thank you very much, Irene. My name is Julius Mbura. I'm the advocacy officer at Enable. I'm based in Nairobi, Kenya. And I also head the computer assistive technology program at Enable. What that means is I'm an alumnus of the program, computer assistive technology program for the blind. And that confirms that I'm actually blind. So I'm happy to be here and very excited for this discussion. Thank you, Irene.
Thank you so much, Julius. As for Tabi, I know she was having technical difficulties. Tabi, if you can hear me or if you come back in, please let us know and we can accommodate you. So just a bit about myself. My name is Irene Barikirika, and I'm the founder and executive director of Enable. I've had the amazing privilege of learning about disability from scratch, to learning about digital challenges and digital inclusion, and realizing digital inclusion does not include accessibility, and now kicking off and making sure that we have to ensure that the digital products and services that we are offering are inclusive to persons with disabilities. So that's the whole mission for Enable. So it's a privilege to be working in this space because it's very complex, but together we can be able to deliver much more to our communities. So just to get us started, one of our speakers, who's Tabi, is still not here, but in the meantime, maybe we can just get started and she'll join as she comes in. And what we want to talk about, Laura, with you right now is, why is disability inclusion important for business? And I know you've worked at Google for a very long time. And the challenge we experience is this, and I'm sure anyone in disability learns about this. Anytime you talk about disability, people think about CSR. But disability is not about CSR. It has nothing to do with CSR whatsoever. It's like when you're hiring just someone who has no disability, you don't say they are CSR. They need to go through the CSR angle. So coming from there, I'm just wondering, can you at least share with us how, why is disability important? And why is it also important to support employees with disabilities?
Yeah, absolutely. Completely agree with you, Irene. So I think something that's really important to think about is that, diverse teams and diverse workforces are going to lead to better products, better environments, better businesses. And one of the main reasons that I think about is we often at Google, we talk about this phrase of nothing about us without us, which is like a core inclusion phrase. And we think about that when it comes to disability, of wanting to make sure if companies are trying to build products that can reach as many people as possible, be as inclusive and as accessible as possible, and have the broadest scale, we absolutely have to factor in people with disabilities, because as we've already covered earlier in this session, like there are so many people across the world living with disability. Disability can impact someone's life at literally any time. When we think about the reach of disability, whether it's somebody with a permanent disability from birth, whether it's an acquired disability, whether it's a temporary disability, for example, a broken arm, a broken leg, a situational disability, you're staring at the sun and out in the sunlight and trying to look at your phone and you can't see your phone. There's so many different ways where, it's so important to be prioritizing accessible products. And the best way to do that, of course, like when we think about this phrase, nothing about us without us, we have to be integrating the perspectives of people with disabilities. And of course, we can do this through things like user research and through engaging with community members. But the absolute best and most fundamental way is to just hire people with disabilities into our teams, make sure we have perspectives embedded within our companies. And therefore, we're getting those insights just on a regular basis of how we could be more inclusive and more accessible. I think it's so important to have that perspective directly represented of a wide variety of disabilities within our companies. And it's also something to think about where people with disabilities have often had to become so resourceful and so creative as we navigate our own lives. Let's be honest, navigating worlds where a lot of different environments were not built for people with disabilities. So we've had to be very creative to be able to navigate them, build different skills, and be resourceful and be able to bring that perspective into companies, I think is so valuable. But one thing that I wanted to make sure to mention, and I'd love to hear from the other panelists on their perspectives, we have had to focus really hard within Google on making sure that we're not only just bringing people with disabilities into the company, but also making sure that when they're here, we can thrive. So we've had to put a lot of different systems into place to support our employees with disabilities so that they can be the most productive and effective in their roles. So this sort of spans a lot of different areas, one of which being our accommodations team. So making sure that if somebody needs a particular set of technology or a particular accommodation, for example, to have to work from home due to a health condition or whatever the accommodation might be, we have a set of people who actually help our employees to navigate this and make sure they have the right accommodations. They're sort of working with that person's manager, making sure everything is smooth and that teammate can work the best that they can. We also have a team that's focused on the accessibility of our internal tools at Google. So when we think about all the different things that we have to do day to day to be able to do our work and do our job and access our paychecks, access everything, our performance reviews, that's fully internal tools. That all has to be accessible as well. And it just needs somebody to be focused on, okay, what is the experience like? Do we have bugs that we need to prioritize so that a blind employee is able to access this screen, for example? So we do have a set of people who are looking specifically just at those internal tools, making sure that internal environment is accessible. We've also focused on different trainings. So for example, for managers about disabilities, and we even made one of these trainings public through a partnership with Disability In. So if you just do a Google search for disability fundamentals for managers from the organization Disability:In, that is available and free for everybody. And we've really worked on trying to empower our managers to be more knowledgeable and more inclusive. And then the last thing that I will mention is we have a strong culture of what we call employee resource groups. And many companies have these, but our employee resource groups are meant for particular communities. So we have one called the Disability Alliance. And I've been one of the global leads of this for many years now, actually. And the Disability Alliance is all volunteer-based within the company. And the goal is to bring together employees with disabilities of many different types, as well as parents and caregivers of people with disabilities, and then allies who just are interested to learn more and to be more inclusive. And we do all kinds of different programming. We have all sorts of different chapters. So for example, I'm part of a chapter for people with low vision and for people who use screen readers. We have chapters for employees who are deaf and hard of hearing, chapters for employees who have ADHD, and so on and so on. So many different chapters, as well as chapters around the world to build community. So that's been a really important place for us to be, just sort of staying connected and also able to talk about what's working well within the company, what's not working so well, where we want to focus some attention on an advocacy internally. So the employee resource group has just been an amazing, amazing community, and I'm so lucky to be a part of it.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you for getting us started. Actually, we always say that you cannot design for someone you do not understand, or for a community that you do not understand. And that's why it's important for businesses to employ persons with disabilities, because unless you have persons with disabilities in your teams, you will never understand. You will never get it right. So that's really, really critical. And thank you for sharing about that. I'll come back to you later on accessibility to ask a question. And let me go first to Richard, and then I'll come back to Tabby. What are some of the good practices, Richard, inclusive practices that contribute to a more inclusive workplace? Because what happens is that most employers, when they hire someone with disability, sometimes you think it's giving them a laptop and a desk and get moving. But what are some of the best practices so that someone with a disability can thrive once they're given a position?
Thank you, Irene, for that question. And I just need to say that creating a disability inclusive workplace requires adopting practices and policies that ensure all employees, regardless of ability, feel welcomed, valued, and sometimes feel fully supportive. So there are various practices that an employer can adopt within the office just to ensure everyone feels part and parcel of that organization. Light for the World will be supporting a number of employers through a number of trainings and support. We have a fully dedicated disability inclusive unit, advisory unit, that work closely with employers, and some of the practices that they normally share with employers or support employers to work with. I'll mention a few. One of them is having inclusive hiring practices. That is core, because how do you engage or attract employees into your organization? Most HR professionals will always say that we advertise, we never see them applying. But the platform, the online, if you advertise your jobs online and your website's accessible, do you normally advertise in platforms where persons with disabilities can really see them? Do you have connections with some organization for persons with disabilities so that those advertisements can also be shared? The recruitment process. Do we have like an opportunity for reasonable accommodation in case an interviewee needs more time, needs to come with an aid into the interview, needs to have the interview done remotely and not have to travel to the venue? So all these factors can mean that you might not really attract persons with disability, or you might not get the interest to apply. Another thing is always one thing that is always said, that accessible physical environment. Yes, I know it's easily said than done, but you see, when the office environment is accessible, it's not just thinking that a wheelchair can enter the room. There is a lift, there is a wheelchair ramp. No, it goes beyond that. You need to think of all places within the office, including the washroom. The washroom is very key because every person naturally must visit the washroom. If it's not accessible, then it's a challenge. If they need to go and make their tea, is it accessible, that office kitchen? The chairs, are they adjustable, the tables? Because we do not want you to be an employee, but you can't go to the boardroom, you can't sit on a particular chair because you can't adjust the chair or the table. So you need to think about all this accessibility within the office, and in case of emergencies, that everyone can be evacuated, and some people do not have to be carried with stretchers. Actually, that is always a bad thing. Then,
okay. Thank you so much, Richard. Because we are still at the beginning and we are running behind. I'm sorry for cutting you just a bit short, but thank you for that. Actually, the one thing I wanted to add that you've said that's really important, for any business that's on this call, you don't have to figure out disability by yourself. Partner with a community of practice. There are so many nonprofit organizations and private companies that focus on disability, not a new company in disability, people with experience, and walk through that journey together, because it's not short-term, it's long-term. And there are so many organizations doing very different, that can bring different skill sets to your organization. So our biggest advice and guidance is partner with the disability community to be able to really understand and implement accessibility in your organizations. So I want to take a moment to welcome Tabi Kioko, who is the diversity equity leader at Safaricom. Tabi, I'm very sorry. I think today's Zoom decided it's working against us, but we are here and we're going to make it happen. So please, over to you. Introduce yourself, tell us who you are and what you do before I get to my first question for you.
Okay, thank you very much, and apologies, I had major technical hitches, but yeah, that's life and we must move on. So my name is Tabi Kioko. I'm the chapter lead, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And my role at Safaricom. So my role in Safaricom involves, programs that actually, address systemic barriers, and also coming up with strategies that promote equity and celebrate diversity. So in short, that is what I do.
Fantastic, fantastic. So I'll have you answer the first question. And what I'm thinking about is, Tabi, how do we get 50 or 100 more companies to be like Safaricom in terms of employing persons with disabilities? I think Safaricom is one of the largest employers of persons with disabilities in Kenya. And I'm sure you've faced a lot of challenges. So maybe you can tell us, why is disability inclusion important? Why does it matter to Safaricom? What business value does it add for Safaricom to be investing so much in this space? Over to you, Tabi.
So thank you so much, Irene. I'll list the context. I don't know whether you've spoken about it, but the world, according to the World Health Organization, there are about 1.3 billion people with one disability or the other. About maybe 140 to 200 in Africa as well. And in Kenya, estimated at 5 million. Yeah, these are people, these are human beings, their lives. So while we are digging deeper into this subject today, talking about, why it is important, let us also remember, these are just not numbers, they are people. So disability inclusion is actually a strategic lever for many organizations. Yeah. When you employ persons with disability, you access a richer talent pool. Yeah. So you have a wider base to choose from. And persons with disability are known to have unique talent, unique problem-solving skills that when brought on the table, help address many challenges. Yeah. So these are competencies in today's world and landscape that are very key to any business success. Number 2, innovation, driving innovation and business transformation. Yeah, when you bring in persons with disability, they come, as I said, with diverse perspectives that drive innovation. Remember, they too have needs that are unmet. So they help you drive insights into that untapped market. So when we talk about performance and corporate reputation in terms of ESG, yeah, a lot of emphasis now by investors and stakeholders is being put on ESG. And people want to measure organizations' ESG performance, yeah? And therefore, stakeholders are demanding meaningful, measurable progress on workforce diversity. And therefore, we can't escape. For us to be responsible and to be a company that cares about ESG, we must onboard persons with disabilities. When it comes to expanding our market, we talked about the 1.3 billion people, yeah, worldwide, yeah, and the many millions in Africa. And then when we double click that and we look at the Kenyan landscape, when you look at that, according to a report I read by Valuable 500, it says that about 8 trillion, that this segment, yeah, alone has a market worth of $8 trillion in annual disposable income. Yeah. And when you combine them with their family and friends, that figure skyrockets to $13 trillion. Seriously, if we are in business, isn't that a market we want to tap into? And how else can we tap into that market other than, come up with products and services that persons with disability can consume? Post-COVID, before I go there, a lot of governments are now also introducing stringent measures, yeah, towards adhering to disability inclusion. And we have in Kenya, that threshold of 5%. And a lot of organizations are really struggling for good and otherwise not good, very good reasons. And therefore, organizations now are beginning to ensure that to mitigate legal risks, yeah, and strengthen their regulatory compliance, they then adhere to working towards creating a roadmap for that 5%. Yeah, so we talk about productivity and retention and many other points. I know we are short of time, so let me stop there.
No, thank you. Thank you. I think you've just confirmed what we said earlier, that disability and digital accessibility are not about CSR, because most people transfer, the minute you hear disability or talking about digital accessibility, we need to go to the CSR department. No, there's business value, and there's no better way to transition this than to go to Julius. And Julius can share with us about just his experiences in workplace, but most importantly, Julius, you can tell us how you use technology. We're going into the space of technology because digital accessibility is very important, especially to someone who's blind or any other disability. Without products being accessible, you cannot be able to use them. So maybe Julius, you can jump in, tell us why is it important, and if you can, share some examples.
Thank you, Irene. I'd say for persons with disabilities, the enabler and also equalizer when it comes to fitting in a work environment is technology, but not only technology, assistive technology and digital accessibility. What do I mean? When we talk about assistive technology, these are components and innovations that have been created to make sure that persons with disabilities use technology just like anyone else. As a person who's blind, I use assistive technologies ranging from screen readers, like the way I'm connecting on my laptop independently, phones with screen readers as well. I'm able to communicate with my colleagues and also to send out emails, plan for meetings, and also join webinars, which are critical as this one. When you talk about digital accessibility, it's making sure that all the digital assets, especially starting with the organization itself, because you cannot be preaching, digital accessibility and you've not started internally. So starting with the website and any other digital asset like portal, any platform, and even like social media platforms. When I talk about internal communication, I mean when you're corresponding with fellow colleagues or sending out communication from your organization. So like for me, when I joined Enable, the first thing I was handed was a laptop with a screen reader. And for any other reasonable accommodation, it varies from individual to individual. I might be blind and the next person is blind, but our reasonable accommodations vary. Because for me, I might be needing, say, non-visual desktop access on my laptop. The next person is more familiar with, say, JAWS. So it's case by case, and we don't look at disability as homogeneous. What works for me doesn't work for the next person. And when you look at digital accessibility, we're not only saying screen readers are essential, but you look at people who are deaf. How do I communicate with the person who's deaf? We have sign language interpretation, and now we're even embracing AI to make sure that communication is seamless. So in my case, when I get into the office, there's a value addition that I have from my colleagues where they have to make sure that I'm comfortable. And we're not talking about people taking my work roles or my job description, but we're talking about a cohesive environment, and organizations should look into disability etiquette training, because as much as we are making the digital environment accessible, there is the human resource. So do people know how to communicate and not being insensitive when they're talking to me or the next person? And even for external communication, because you're not only dealing with the persons in the office, you're also dealing with people out there. So the culture that you create in a workforce then determines if it will be a conducive environment for persons with disabilities or it will be toxic. So starting with the culture that you have and the training that you have, that also translates to how you get to, and I like how Tabi has talked about, persons with disabilities being human, because how you also treat persons with disabilities who interact with your, say even social media, or any communication that you put out there, it means that it has to be fully accessible. Using alternative text on images to make sure that screen readers read to persons with disabilities, especially visually impaired, what is captured on the images, and also using captioning for videos and audio description. And I know some companies have been struggling with, say, adverts, and it's very easy to make, say, adverts accessible. You just make it in a narration format where a person who's visually impaired can actually easily follow. And for people who are deaf, you make sure you embed sign language interpretation. And when I talk about audio description, alternative text, and captioning on materials that are online, this is part of communication from your organization, from your institution, that goes out to persons with and without disabilities. And embedding assistive digital accessibility components does not take anything away from you. and it actually makes it more accessible to a wider number of people who are consuming your product. So I think for me, digital accessibility should be from the onset when you're developing any product, any app, any website, any digital asset. And it should not be an afterthought where you're trying to move things around to accommodate persons with disabilities. When we say leave no one behind, we mean you start with inclusion from the get-go. Thank you again.
Thank you so much. And because I know we do not have too much time, because I know we'll be getting some questions. If we can keep our questions, our answers to 2 minutes, that would be fantastic. Julius, thank you so much. I'll actually bring in Laura first to talk about, one, what is digital accessibility? It's funny, when I started working in this space many years ago, I used to come to Kenya and I talk to businesses about it. They're like, when we talk about digital accessibility, what does it mean? Because for me, access means access to water, healthcare, food, because that's what people are used to. So I think it's important we share what is digital accessibility in terms of, it's really as simple as making sure that other people, everybody can access the same content, the same information. It doesn't matter what assistive technology they're using, meaning that a person with a disability is not asking for a special favor. They're just saying, when you design your products, when you design that website, please factor in our needs. And I go into this saying, we do have global accessibility standards, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, which we'll be sharing later. But also, Kenya is privileged to actually have a standard. So any business in Kenya that has digital products actually has the requirements from the Kenyan government, what you're expected to do, all the technical requirements that you can follow to make sure your digital products are accessible. But when you're doing that, you have to have people with disabilities working with you to be able to achieve proper accessibility and usability. So I'll go over to Laura, because Laura, Google has invested a lot in in accessibility. And now we're talking about digital products. How does Google integrate accessibility into the development product lifecycle? And also, please feel free to add a bit more if you feel that you want to talk a bit more about what's really accessibility, because sometimes it's taken to be extremely complex, yet it's not.
Yeah, so for us, we have figured out over the very long time that we've been trying to optimize accessibility within Google, the approach that works best for us, and I know a lot of other companies take a similar approach these days, is we consider it like a hub and spoke model, like a wheel, where we have a central team as well as many teams embedded throughout the company. So I happen to sit on the central team, which we call Products for All Accessibility. And the team that I lead is focused on horizontal efforts that we scale across the company. So for example, how do we educate our employees about digital accessibility? How do we do testing and analysis of our products? How are we consulting with each of the individual teams that is working on accessibility, and so on and so on? How do we embed those external standards in a way that makes sense for us, as we try to scale accessibility guidelines across the company? Our central team also does things like engaging externally with community members, going to conferences and talking about Google's accessibility story and progress, trying to spread awareness and work with disability organizations so that we can integrate community feedback and send it back into the product teams. But separately, we have these various product teams. I used to be on our Chrome and Chromebook accessibility team for many years before starting this role. And we have a team embedded within Chrome, a team embedded within Android, embedded within YouTube, and so on with our major products, because we found that's the most optimal way that we can scale and integrate accessibility for us. We need to have folks, for example, on Android, when we're launching Android accessibility features, or we're talking about making something within the Android interface more accessible, they have to be part of that team's discussions, part of those design discussions and launch review discussions. It has to be like you're embedded and integrated with those various teams. So we do our best to really stay aligned between the central team and the product teams. But that approach has seemed to work the best for us, to make sure we've got folks sort of in charge of representing accessibility within each of the major teams. So we have this mix of how do we ensure each product that we launch is following those standards and guidelines and is accessible for launch. But we also, since we build platforms at Google, so we build laptops like Chromebooks, we build Android phones, we build that operating system and so on, we also are focused on building assistive technologies. So for example, building captioning technology that's included in our video conferencing or across all of Android or across YouTube, building a screen reader built into Android or built into a Chromebook, building magnification and voice control and things like that. So I think about it in those separate ways of making all interfaces just accessible according to guidelines of, contrast and alt text and all these different things that what Irene mentioned of the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines and beyond. And then also, how do we build assistive technology features to keep enabling more and more experiences and just building them into our products for free so that more people can access them.
Thank you so much, Laura. I think what you've made clear is that digital accessibility is about product development. And that's why we keep going back to the same thing we're saying. This is not a CSR, it's product development, there's business value. And my next question, I still want to ask it, even if you've somewhat answered it. Why did Google invest in accessibility? What is the business value? And where does the accessibility budget fit within your company? Because we're trying to get away from the CSR piece. So where does, that's where I'm heading with this, yeah.
Yeah, totally separate from CSR for us. So it's very much in product. And that's where the budgets come from. We don't have like one centralized team or budget. We've got many teams, as I just mentioned, and like the budget comes within each of those various teams within the company. So not CSR, fully product. And that's our recommendation. There are many reasons why Google prioritized accessibility and has funded this. The first just being, going back to what Tabby said, like, these are humans and these are real lives that we're affecting. And if our mission at Google is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful, we have to factor in people with disabilities. Like, if we're trying to scale our products to the most people as possible and be able to embed within education and create social connectivity and access to information, we have to include people with disabilities. So like, this is just fundamentally the best thing to be doing. But from a business side, it's also a way to unlock sales or prevent blocking of sales, because more and more now, this discussion of accessibility is coming up in the procurement of products and sales for other businesses. If you're selling into government, if you're selling into education, whether younger, youth education, K-12 or higher education, you have to make sure that accessibility is embedded into our products in order to be able to sell. It's something that more and more businesses are looking for, of what is your accessibility story before they make that purchase. And then separately, there's also more reasons, like the regulatory landscape is heating up these days. We have the European Accessibility Act coming out in June of this year, biggest of its kind. And there are many different penalties if companies are not embedding and integrating accessibility into products, whether that's financial penalties, or even there are a few different countries within the European Accessibility Act that mention jail time, which is the first of its kind again. And again, there are many different reasons. We don't like thinking about that lower bound of lawsuits and litigation and potential jail time, but it is a factor. And sometimes that does resonate with people, whereas other times the opportunity to sell more will resonate more with other leaders, or just the fundamental aspect of this is the right thing to do for humans, that will resonate with more people. So you kind of have to think about this business case and know who your audience is and be able to talk to any of these different aspects of this business case. But we've sort of integrated this across the board. And again, I'll just go back to the scale opportunity though really quickly. I know we're short on time, but it was mentioned earlier of the curb cut effect and how we realized this with many of our products that we built at Google. I will think about captions, where captions were originally developed, of course, for people who are deaf and hard of hearing, and they're critical for people who are deaf and hard of hearing. But now that we're seeing captions scale so widely across YouTube, across social media, by so many people who are just out in the world and maybe don't have headphones and they just want to be able to watch content and they're relying on captions. There's so many instances where products that were developed originally for people with disabilities have now scaled so widely across much broader populations that, again, that gives us more and more leverage to talk to leadership and say, like, look at the potential growth here. Like, we've made this product better for people with disabilities, and that has made it better for everyone. And here's how. So please help us keep funding this and prioritizing these innovations. So I think there are just many different reasons why Google has prioritized this, and we're continuing to prioritize, but I'll stop there.
No. Thank you so much, Laura. I think you've really added value to the conversation in terms of just our audience understanding that it's actually about products and services, the products you offer to the market. And we all know that 70% of disabilities are hidden. Even on this call, there are people with disabilities, but they've never disclosed to anyone. So if you make your products accessible, you actually serve a wider community than you actually think. But I think what's also important that you brought up is about the European Accessibility Act that's coming due. Kenya has its own standard, which very few companies have implemented so far, but we are working with the government of Kenya to make sure it's implemented. So what we are saying is there are standards, but we do not want to get to the point where a company is being sued for them to act. And it's not what I think even the disability community, personally, I'm not interested in that. I'm interested more in supporting businesses to implement accessibility and make sure that it's valuable. But I think the one thing that's important to note is most of the companies here, most of them may be American companies. America does have its accessibility processes and standards that you can follow. And if not, there's the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And what you find is even if these companies are actually following accessibility laws here in the US, what happens is when they go to Africa, nobody knows about accessibility. You go to the local offices, they've never heard about accessibility. So what we are saying is that for most of these companies, that their digital accessibility policies do not trickle down to their local offices in Africa, which would be extremely beneficial because we've already said there's a population of almost 200 million people that is very valuable. It's an untapped market. So we highly, highly encourage the businesses that are here to look internally and see if you have the resources. And if you don't have, please, Enable is here to support you through your digital accessibility journey. So let me move over to the next point. I think we only have a few minutes left. So I'm sure as we keep going, we'll keep it short. I think I'll give Tabby 1 minute to just tell us. Safaricom has employed a lot of people with disabilities. Can you please tell us how they're using technology to really efficiently work or thrive in the workplace? Just 1 minute.
Let me just start by saying that we always say that technology serves everyone, and technology makes things easier for everyone, right? But for persons with disabilities, it actually makes things possible. So you can imagine, just having to being facilitated to actually access something because of technology. It really means a lot to persons with disability. So at Safaricom, we are very, very, very intentional in at looking at reasonable accommodation for all our 207 staff with disabilities across the business. Yeah. And as Julia said, you could have the same disability, but then the interventions are different. So post-COVID, we actually adopted a hybrid working model where, if you're not customer facing, then you can a few days in the week, you can work from home. And that meant that persons with disability required more support in order to be able to work efficiently and effectively. Yeah. So some of the things that, that the world of COVID really opened to all of us is the use of enterprise collaborative tools. Yeah. I think more than ever, we have more people meeting on Zoom, on Teams, whether it's Google Meets, and sharing information on different platforms, sharing info on Yama and just, feeling free to just communicate and throwing out information out there for anybody to access. I think that has unlocked a lot of potential. Yeah, virtual trainings is something that we didn't normally adapt, especially when you're in the same space. But what is happening right now is we're letting persons with disability work at the convenience of their work spaces remotely, and we can conduct trainings, without them having to come into the workspace. And this also is very important and convenient for other staff as well. Yeah, when we talk about learning, we say keep learning. If you stop learning, you die. Yeah, so we need to learn and learn and relearn. So for us, we have an in-house platform that we call Safaricom Grow. This is a learning experience platform. And when I say a learning experience, it is exactly that. It offers you a great experience of learning. It has thousands of courses from different vendors. And what we have seen is there's a lot of uptake by persons with disability in terms of their learning hours. Yeah, they're able to access whatever they want to access, whatever course, and then it gives them certifications. So we've seen a lot of uptake in terms of, just upskilling and reskilling of staff. Yeah. We've of course leveraged, time is up, yeah? So we continue to leverage on technology, even beyond the work, to ensuring that even our persons with disability are able to join virtual fitness programs online so that they can continue to keep fit. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We can feel the passion through the technology. So just 30 seconds, can you explain to us the challenges that are preventing businesses from achieving the 5% policy? And you can explain what the 5% is and quickly just tell us what's preventing.
So a lot of organizations actually are facing numerous challenges, and I'll bucket them into three, right? So the first is the mindset. Yeah. So a lot of organizations or leaders have what I call misconceptions, stereotypes about disability. Yeah, they think, oh, if I employ a person with disability, they'll come and slow me down. It's very expensive to start building, accommodations for them. And very important, one of the things that people think about disability is they'll come and drop productivity. Yeah, they won't be productive at work. And therefore, that's one of the reasons. Yeah. So it's about mindset. How do we then change the mindset of employers? Yeah, because we know those are just stereotypes. I can tell you, we've just finished our performance, what do you call it? Our PDR, performance season at Safaricom, because we are closing the year. And 2 persons with disabilities have scored outstanding. And I'm telling you, Irene, it's so hard to score outstanding. Have scored outstanding straight for the last 3 years.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's just amazing when you dig up insights from your data and you see all these patterns that actually come to demystify that persons with disabilities are performers. Yeah. To demystify that they're actually, performers. Yeah. So that is the mindset. So we have to deal with the managers, how do they then embrace? Yeah. So the other bit is the skill set. There is a skills gap. Yeah. And this is something we've talked for a while. What the universities or learning institutions are churning out, yeah, are skills that, the job market doesn't need, in quotes, right? Yeah? So you find that there's a mismatch between, what the demand and supply. And therefore, you find that, yes, there are vacancies in different organizations. They want to employ persons with disabilities, but those persons with disabilities do not have the prerequisite skills for them to actually join the organization. And remember, employing persons with disabilities is not a tick box. It's not a tick box exercise. They come to, they come to bring in value, yeah? And we want them to come and do real work. Yeah, so skill set is one of the big things that is actually, slowing down the uptake of persons with disability into the organization. The other thing is tool set. We're talking about what is it, what is in your toolbox? What can we leverage on to ensure that managers are well equipped with all the knowledge they need to ensure that they lead inclusive teams. So a lot of managers, a lot of leaders are afraid. They don't know how to deal with disability, and they just hide in there and not come forth. They don't raise their hand. And that's why Kenya Business and Disability Network, was formed to support organizations, to support, employers, because it's an employer-led for employers outfit, so that they can create opportunities for persons with disabilities and work with other organizations, be handheld, so that they can find a smoother path into disability inclusion. So those are some of the reasons.
Okay, thank you so much, Tabi. I'll ask this same question. What are the barriers affecting this policy for 5%, Richard? You have just 1 minute, because I know you do work with businesses. So please, 1 minute. We are running out of time. I'm sorry.
No, we'll need some affirmative action here and increase the seconds. Anyways, so just to answer you quickly, in the interest of time, I'll just pick 2 items. And because the question relates to what Tabi was talking about, so I'll just add whatever has not been said. So one of the main barriers that I'll talk about is the law talks about the state shall ensure progressive implementation. The word progressive has been a big barrier when it comes to enforcement of this principle. Reason being, progressive can be 0.001%. As long as you are making progress, you can debate and say there is some improvement. So what we've been challenging the Public Service Commission is just to come up with a clear framework on some of the main milestones that they want to attain within a particular period. So far, the number is still less than 2%. The last time I saw the data, it was around 1%. Now, just before I close, the second item relates to statistics. Data and statistics is key everywhere. It has already been contested. The 2019 census showed us that the percentage of the population with disability is 2.2% of the population. People have been wondering, how do we attain 5% if the population is 2.2%? So that has been a bit challenging, and some people still debate and say the numbers are not there, but that census and the data that we received has been highly contested and it has been highly controversial. So I just wanted to share only those 2, and thank you for that.
Yeah. No, thank you so much. Derek, we just need a bit more time, like 5 minutes before we start answering the questions. To my dear panelists, 1 minute. When I say this, 1 minute, I wanted to find out from Tabi, and Julius, you'll close for us. How is the American policy on accessibility affecting, how is the American policy on DEI actually affecting the African market? Have you seen anything?
So, yeah, there's been a lot of debate. Can you hear me? There's been a lot of debate on the DEI subject in relation to what is happening in the US. And for us, surprisingly, at Safaricom, it's in fact we have continued to raise the bar in terms of embracing and being accountable in terms of our disability targets and our, gender targets. I think what is happening in the US is not exactly our case in Kenya. I think we are living in two different cultures, so to speak, and what they deem as DEI is not the same definition as for us in Kenya. And to add on to that, I think we are still in the infancy stage of looking at, how do we get equal representation of women in management, in top, how do we get to that 5%? How do we look at, empowering persons with disabilities? How do we tap into marginalized communities and bring them in so that we can now begin to address their needs, even with our products and services? So I think for us, we haven't slowed down, and I don't see any reason to say we are slowing down. I think we are actually accelerating our efforts for disability inclusion and for DEI. Of course, there's some implication here and there, but I don't think it's going to stop us in Africa. Thank you.
Fantastic. Laura, you have 1 minute. I think what we want to learn from you, how is accessibility being, is it being affected by DEI, or please explain. You're in the US, it's Google, you're in the heart of the storm. So
yes, and I will keep it to even shorter than 1 minute. I'll just say, there are things that are happening in the broader DEI space, but we've made a real clear point to make the distinction. Accessibility, product work. It's product design engineering, and that work is just continuing business as usual. Again, thinking about the increased regulations and standards, this work is even more important now than ever to be continuing and accelerating. So for us, it's really business as usual on our side.
Excellent. Julius, before I start jumping into questions, what would you want the viewers or the participants to know about digital accessibility and when they think of disability or someone like you in a work environment?
Thank you, Irene. I'd say we don't have to complicate stuff when we talk about digital accessibility. It's a matter of accommodating everyone regardless of their abilities. And when you think of persons with disabilities in a work setup or a workplace, it should be seamless when they are given the right tools and also accorded the right support to actually work and thrive in their own right. So I'd say you don't have to subscribe to the misconceptions of low productivity. Persons with disabilities have all it takes and their capabilities are unmatched. It only needs opportunities, and we actually hate sympathy. So it's a high time to give persons with disabilities the opportunities they need for them to live a fulfilling life. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julius. I'll jump into the questions and I'll just run through, and if I see one anyone can answer, you can jump in. Bernard Kariuki is asking, presenting disability inclusion as a business case is not a walk in the park. It requires a buy-in from the top management of the team. What other approaches or strategies one can use to enhance the buy-in in corporate profit-making institutions or companies? I'll answer one piece, then I ask Laura to do the other piece. It starts from all directions, vertical, horizontal, every direction. I'll say this, if you start from the bottom to convince people at the bottom, you'll never get to the top. But even if you get the buy-in from the top, you need the people on the side and the people at the bottom to support your disability journey. So I'll say this, your most important is the top, because they're the ones who allocate budget. They own the budgets and can make it happen. But you need the entire community. So horizontal, vertical, all directions, you need buy-in. Laura, you want to say anything to that?
I just completely agree. Completely agree. It has to be all directions, including like absolutely the top. And we also need that sort of middle tier of management, because those are the folks who are actually setting the priorities within the teams and executing on them. So yes, need buy-in across the chain. We've even had success having identifying executive sponsors. That's been one way that we have sort of worked with leaders of major parts of the company to loop them in, educate them, and get them invested and keep them connected to the mission. So that's been one tip that has worked pretty well for us. But yes, all levels, all directions. It can't only be bottoms up, fueled by passion. It's got to be also from the top.
Excellent, thank you. So there are two questions. There's one about making neurodiverse content accessible to, content accessible to people who are autistic or neurodiverse. And then there's another question about making websites, mobile apps accessible. Rita, you can check the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines or contact Enable. Just go to the website, the Enable website, and contact someone there, or someone can drop our information on the chat and we can provide some resources, or through AmCham, we can also send some resources for you. Someone else asked, would it be possible for Tabby to share the piece of performance report? Tabby, yes or no? You're mute.
So to share the piece on, so that was our internal thing that we did.
Okay.
And we were just measuring, we were just looking at the different segments, you know, how are the Gen Zs performing? Yeah. How are women performing? So we were looking at different segments of the business, and it was very interesting. And of course, being a diehard disability advocate, I was very quick to note, you know, that good piece about performance and persons with disabilities.
Okay, thank you. So there's this question that's really interesting. What are the panelists' thoughts about tech becoming for the elite in the disability community? So especially Africa, it means people from rural areas and poor people with disabilities can barely afford assistive technology. Looking at recent developments of using, I can't read that. How can everyone access assistive devices regardless of the economic background? So Jerry Modoni, let me say this. This is something Enable is looking into. AT is a complex space. And for us, we believe that for us to have enough AT in the country, we have to use, most AT has been imported. So we do support importation of AT, but we also understand there are some challenges in terms of some of it is not the best quality for the type of terrain that we have in Africa, but it's still important for some of it to be imported. But we believe also that unless there's local manufacturing, then affordability will always be a problem. So this is a challenge we are working on, and it's a long-term challenge. It's not short-term. So please follow Enable and you'll learn more about what we are doing. I don't think I've left out any other question. And I think for us, we have just a few minutes left. Maybe I can just give each person 30 seconds to close, and then I'll wrap up and hand over to Derek. So maybe we can start with you, Richard. You have 30 seconds. You're on mute.
Thank you. And I really think we had a good engagement. One thing that I feel I need to quickly respond to relates to that perception that ATs are used by the elite. I think it's a perception issue, because the moment you get a job, you'll most likely need assistive technology to support you. And in a way, someone will now start calling you elite. The same applies. You know, an assistive technology will help you really become more included, be able to aggressively get these opportunities in the society. So when you start being economically productive, that does not mean that it is a reserve for the elite. No, it's just that your life is progressing just because you've now started using some devices to assist you be more integrated and included into the society. Otherwise, just to close is to say, inclusion is about values. Values are very sensitive because when you challenge someone about their values, they feel it's like, you know, you are talking about someone's, you are going deeper into the viscerals. So as a person, if you have a chance to make a decision, you have that power. Do make decisions that cover everyone. Laura put it very well that at Google, they want to reach everyone. So everyone is everyone. You must think about it. You must budget for inclusion as part of the cost for the product, not as a separate thing like a CSR thing. That is it from me. Thank you, everyone. And that's it.
Thank you, Laura. Please jump in. Thank you so much, Richard.
Sure. Thank you. It's been so lovely being part of the conversation today. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for taking steps to learn more about this business case for accessibility and disability inclusion. I'll just end with something that I've already commented on, but I just so firmly believe that accessible products and accessible design is just better design, better products, and a diverse workforce with people with disabilities is better, more creative, more insightful, more resourceful, and will just lead to better environments and better products and services. So thank you for prioritizing this discussion.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And then we can go on to Julius. You want to say something, closing remarks?
Yes, I'd like to say that, you know, the days of trying to look at disability from a charity case model and also as a weak link are gone. And these are times where we should embrace the different digital accessibility assets that we have to make sure that everyone is accommodated regardless of their abilities. And I'd say, you know, we don't choose the disabilities that we have, but making it more accessible and more supportive to persons with disabilities makes it a better world. So leave no one behind. And remember that in whatever capacity you have, it's an effort for everyone. It doesn't belong to the government. Disability inclusion is for us and all of us.
Excellent. Tabby?
Yeah, thank you very much. This afternoon was really, really great, and I've enjoyed every minute of it. So my closing remarks is just to remind us that inclusion is a journey and it is effort. Yeah, let no one tell you that it's really a marathon. It's not a sprint. So whether we are looking at disability inclusion from a lens of employees, our customers, the community, or the company as a whole, let's not look at disability inclusion as a tick box compliance exercise, but as a long-term business strategy for forward, future-looking organizations. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tabby. And for me, I think just to bring this to a close, it's important to remember that each one of us can get into any form of disability at any one point. It can be a simple road accident. You can do a head-on collision, you lose your sight. You could get sick. Age, as you know, as you age, things happen to your eyes, things happen to other places. So there's a lot. And persons with disabilities don't live in another continent. They are our brothers, they are our sisters, they are our colleagues. As I said, 70% of disabilities are hidden. There are people you work with in your company who have disabilities, but they can never disclose because you put them in a box. So let's embrace disability as part of who we are. Because if we do, then all these digital products and services that we are developing, we will make sure that accessibility is at the heart of these products. And that means that you'll be factoring in the needs of everyone, and accessibility will not become an afterthought. You'll not be thinking about if someone who's blind needs the website accessible, it's an extra budget that needs to go somewhere else. No, if you factor in in their needs from the beginning, then you'll be able to have them all the way until the end of the product that you develop. That's really important. Something else for businesses to understand. Disability or accessibility is not a competition. If you compete, you will be on your own for a very long time. But if you collaborate, we will go through this journey together for a very, very long time and really transform lives the way we need to. Both add business value, help you make your profits, increase your sales, tap into a market that you haven't tapped into, but at the same time, really the human side of who we are, transform lives for persons with disabilities. So as we think about disabilities, we want you to take away that what you need to think about is about the digital products that you're developing all the time and the importance of making them accessible. Now, to support you in doing this work, I want to invite all of you, there was actually a slide deck for that, to Inclusive Africa Conference. This is the digital accessibility conference that Enable and other partners host every year, and Safaricom has been extremely supportive. Even Google has been super supportive in this for the last 5 years. And we are hosting it in Nairobi on June 5th, 3rd through the 5th at the Hyatt Hotel. And it's really to talk about digital accessibility in employment, in products and services, in education, in all sectors. So please join us. You will meet people from all over the world. We have the international community that will be participating. We also have our colleagues, our brothers and sisters from all over Africa who come and talk about what are they doing in their countries. We have both private sector, government, and persons with disabilities, and also organizations for persons with disabilities in the same space, because we need to create this together. So we ask you to join us at Inclusive Africa on June 5th through June 3rd in Nairobi, and it's being organized by Enable. So if you need additional information, send an email, post something, and we'll get in touch with you. But just to say thank you so much for your time, for taking time to join us. To our amazing speakers, thank you for educating us. There's always something to learn. I walk away having learned something and just knowing what's going on in every space. And I believe we need to keep convening, keep coming together so that we share knowledge. So I want to say thank you so much for your time and for preparing for this with us. And for the technical team and everybody else who's in the background, I want to say a special thank you. Nobody can see you, but we know you're there supporting us. Last but not least, to AmCham, this has been an amazing day for us. We've been planning to do this for a long time, and we know this is the first of many. So we want, as Enable, we want to say thank you so much. So Derek, do you want me to hand over back to you? Derek, please.
Thank you, Irene. And I want to thank all the panelists as well. Thank you for running this session expertly. I wouldn't want to take more of the time for the people who attended, but I want to thank them for making time to be part of this conversation and taking it forward. We will be sharing the recording of today's session for those who didn't manage to see through and those who didn't manage to join, so that they can catch up this conversation. As Irene mentioned, if you have any questions at all, if they're directed to any of the panelists or to Enable, please feel free to share them directly with AmCham, and we'll direct the questions appropriately. If you want us to connect you to any of the panelists today here or Enable directly, please feel free to reach out and we will make the necessary introductions. I wish you all a wonderful evening, and for those in the US, I wish you a wonderful day. Thank you for this session.
Thank you.
Thank you. And bye-bye, Laura.
Thank you, and bye, everybody.
Richard, Irene.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
That was great. Thank you, guys.
Julius.